Hey guys, Edre here, and I'm really excited for this review. I'm going to be reviewing the new Cordiale album, 14 Steps to a Better You. Going into this album, I had interesting expectations. I was not necessarily expecting this album to blow me away, but I was also not really expecting it to be too bad. Because a little bit of background, like I do in all my reviews, I knew who these guys were. I was aware of the style of music they kind of made. They've always kind of fallen into that sort of pop rock sound, a little bit of indie in there as well. They are from Australia, so with a little bit of that influence and tone in their voices and everything. But going into this, I was not sure if they were just going to go a very conventional route, or if they were going to maybe go a little bit outside of the box, or maybe perfect their sound, which was pretty much what they did here. Their earlier album, which came out, I believe, in 2017 or 2018. I might not have that right, so do not crucify me for that. But it was a pop rock, pretty solid sound throughout. Pretty well, actually, executed sound throughout as well. And I really kind of enjoy that about them. They always seem very passionate in what they do. So that was not anything I was afraid of going into this. But they kind of did build off of their sound, and I do kind of enjoy that a lot. They build it up. They build off their sound that they have on their debut album on this one, 14 Steps to a Better You, and improve upon it in many spots. The album, I'm not sure how I want to tackle it going through the track list, because there's a lot of good stuff really for me to say about a lot of these tracks. So I'm first going to go over, instead of going over track by track like I usually do, I'm going to go over the overall feel and atmosphere and vibe of the album, because quite frankly, I think that is really important. There have been quite a few albums I've covered this year that have a pretty consistent tone to it, but it's a very track by track thing. So this one doesn't really follow through with that. There's pretty much an overarching good feel to the album. And I've come across a lot of albums that have a pretty uniform sound throughout, and that hurts the album to the point where it kind of sucks, because a lot of the songs start blending together. They all start feeling the same. I do not get that feeling with this album. I get very unique sounds from pretty much all of the tracks. Foster the People was a band that came to mind when I first heard some of these songs. When I was first listening to it all the way through, some of these songs I kind of got some from the vocals, from the production, from even some of the instrumentals. I got some of their vibes. But as the album progressed on, those sounds started to kind of shift a bit. It didn't really feel like I was listening to a band that was inspired by them as much as I did a band that took some of their influence but built upon it to make something much better, which is why I appreciate what Lime is doing here. They take that kind of indie, poppy rock sound from around 10 years ago, early 2010s-ish, and build upon it, give it a more modern flair. But that's not the only kind of style that they dive into here. There's sort of a pseudo-60s kind of pop, sort of Tame Impala type sound as well. Now for some people that don't listen to this kind of music, you could be like, Foster the People, Tame Impala, they're on the same level playing for you. But what I mean is that Tame Impala has much more of a psychedelic side to them, very similar to like early Pink Floyd or some of the crazier Beatles stuff. But what Lime does here is they take some of those more 60s, and yes, a bit of the psychedelic stuff, but add a bit more of a pop flair to it, a bit more of an accessible side, and execute it extremely well. Arguably, I think, better than Tame Impala did on their album that dropped this year, The Slow Rush. That might be a controversial thing for me to say, because Tame Impala is a very praised band, but I just think that this album executes this style more. But just when you think that they've got that sound down, they also do dabble a little bit into some of those 80s synth vibes. I get that on songs like On Your Own, and especially on the song Money. I think this is a good transition for me to go into talking about the track list. The song Money has a really fat, great groove behind it. Really going hard on that song. I love the energy, the passion, and the groove. The groove really does drive that song home. And around the middle section, there's sort of a break, not really a break, but sort of a bridge, where there's some really good guitar work as well. And this is one of the things that makes this album stand out. Very simplistic, very kind of acoustic inspired, but very just strumming, very simplistic guitar work throughout this album, but it has a lot of emotion in it, and it really does drive this album home, especially with the guitar work. It really kind of adds to that nice little indie feel to it. But going back to that whole 60s thing, there are some songs on here that I think have Beatles vibes. I get a lot of Beatles vibes from some of these tracks. No Plans, Make Plans is arguably one of the songs that is one of my favorites on here. I really do like the melody. I really like the catchiness of that song quite a bit. And it does give me some Beatlesy vibes. The kind of vocal inflections on the chorus, some of just the melodies that they are using, and some of the chord progressions and transitions into parts of songs are very reminiscent of the Beatles. However, unlike some bands that try to be like the Beatles, it doesn't come off as an imitation. It comes off as, once again, like I said with Foster the People, like I said with Tame Impala and the 80s and the 60s stuff, it sounds like a band that's very inspired by that sound, which is fully understandable. I mean, most people love the Beatles. But they do add their own flair to it. I mean, at the end of No Plans to Make Plans, there's like what I believe is a kazoo. I don't remember the Beatles using kazoo. So yeah, there is a pretty nice sort of modern flair, a bit of a unique flair on most of these songs, even if they do have a bit of inspiration from Beatles and all that. But going off that 60s thing, which is sort of relates to the Beatles as well, We Just Get By is another song that, in my opinion, also did give me very much 60s vibes. I do believe that was one of the more... I know I feel dumb right now, but if that is what I'm thinking of, I'm getting this confused with another song, but the more acousticness of that song does feel very much like... But I might be talking about Sunshine. Man, I'm so dumb. Either way, some of the acoustic work on this album, it does sort of remind me of some of the more hippie-related music in the 60s and even in some of the 70s folky stuff. But once again, they have their own sort of flair to it. And one of the things that stands out to me about a lot of these tracks is that even though it has some 80s synthy vibes on some of these songs, it does have a bit of a 60s sound. One of the things that really shines through to me is how soothing some of these tracks can be. Elephant in the Room is a very soothing track, and the closing track, Following Fools, is a wonderful closer with a great guitar lick throughout it. I love the guitar lead, very greatly produced as well. I really do like the... It's hard. It's like clean, but it's slightly distorted, but it's not too distorted. It's a very nice tone on the guitar. I gotta give them props on that track. But one of the major things that makes these songs soothing, though, is honestly the vocals. The vocals were one of those things that I was a little hesitant at first, because there is a lot of vocal inflections throughout this album that I hear in a lot of modern pop albums, even in artists like Billie Eilish to even some of the bigger artists out there. It's hard to explain, but if you listen, you'd know. Some of the vocal stylings and inflections on this album, the way some of the words are pronunciated, do have that kind of modern pop feel to it. And while that threw me off at first, because it's not something that I'm always fond of, something about it just feels nice. It's a nice, unique take on it. I don't know if that's their Australian accents, but Can't Take All the Blame is definitely one of those songs in which the vocals are beautiful. I love the way, and that's another song that has Beatles vibes, but the vocal production, not really the production, but the vocal tone on songs like that are very beautiful, and definitely add a unique touch, because if there wasn't just that little slight bit of more uniqueness on here, the vocals probably would have been not my favorite part, because they do follow a lot of the trends that I hear. But they are done well. I have to give them props for that song. The song Robbery. I want to cover that song because that was probably the biggest track I would say from this album. It was a single. Great hook. A really good hook on that song. It's been stuck in my head since I heard it. I like the take on. I like the kind of more energetic feel on this one. It's a bit more uplifting, I feel. It has a nice indie sort of instrumental palette, and I gotta give props to the drummer. Some solid drumming on this song. I don't have nothing else really to say there, but that is probably my last. This will probably be my last point here. There is just a really good uplifting feel about this album, and it's definitely well needed too in the time, especially the times, the landscape that we live in, with between some of the craziness going on in the big leagues, some of the craziness going on in the music world, and then Corona. I mean, for real, it's pretty kind of it's a weird year. It's a weird year. And just like how I said with the 1975 about how that album was the perfect album for this time, 14 Steps to a Better You is a good uplifter. Well, I think that the 1975 Notes on a Conditional Form is sort of a warning to the public, telling people to kind of wake up and open their eyes. This is sort of like enjoy life a little bit. And I greatly appreciate that. And I guess just some brief overview before I give it a score. I do like their mixture of sounds from, their 60s stuff to their kind of 80s vibes to some of the Foster the People and Beatlesy vibes, but it all blends together to create a nice little unique sound, and I really do enjoy the more unique take on vocals on this album. I do quite like that, and some of these songs just have great grooves, are either really soothing, they're just executed very well. Overall, it's all around a pretty solid project, probably one of the best more indie artists that I've stumbled across of the past few months, and I'm really glad that this album delivers, because like I said in the beginning, I was a little skeptical because there are some trends that I heard pop up on this album, but yeah, at the end of the day, I was very satisfied with this project. I wasn't really expecting me to enjoy it nearly as much as I do, but I do. And I think I have come to a pretty big conclusion as to how I would rate this album. And I would give it a pretty solid 9 out of 10. And that's a really good review. I've only ever given one other 9. That was the BTS album, Map of the Soul 7. And then obviously 1975 received a 10. But I've reviewed a good amount of albums this year, and not too many albums rank that high. A lot of them end up in the 8 category, which is very good, but 9's pretty good. Lime Cordiale, 14 Steps to a Better You. Pretty good album. I recommend everybody check it out. A lot of great material, really uplifting as well. Definitely kind of, I think, what I needed, what I think a lot of people need. I'd love to hear where these guys go in the future. They've really perfected the pop rock sound. Good job. Check it out.